boys, welcome back to the channel. Gentlemen, in this video we are going to be going over how to conquer yourself, how I was able to conquer myself. Now, I don't completely mean conquer yourself, because I truly believe that in life you are always continuously trying to conquer yourself, right? But for the most part, what I'm getting at is how I've completely changed my life in the span of 4 and 5 years. 360'd everything. The entire trajectory of my whole life has changed. I like to say this in the way of, like, if you knew me before 4.5 years ago, whenever I see you now, I need to reintroduce myself. We need to reintroduce each other to each other, because we are completely different people. I'm a completely different person than I was 4.5 years ago. If you think you know me, you don't know me anymore. And that's the best way for me to explain this, okay? How I've built this insane bulletproof mindset in a way. Okay, so I've broken it down into a couple different steps on what happened. How was I able to make this drastic change into my entire life? And so the first thing I had to do, and the first thing you must do, is you have to get exposed to a different life. What do I mean? So for myself, when I was in the beginning stages of completely having everything change, how do you expect to change if you aren't aware of the change, right? And so I was going to college, and I slowly started getting exposed to online business, essentially like drop shipping, trading, and just making money online, like essentially like entrepreneurship on a deeper level, right? Because now, real quick, so I grew up in a business. My family, my mom and dad have their own business, but I never really understood the concept and like dabbled into it heavily until I got into college, like online business. I had other small ventures, like starting a detailing business, power washing, cleaning windows, all that stuff. I had that stuff, but more so online business was when I was in college and started to get exposed to that kind of stuff. So the only way this change came was from the exposure of the other side, bro. Because currently I was on the path of normality, right? The fucking college job. I was going to school to become a dentist, right? And it wasn't like, if I wasn't exposed in some way, shape, or form to the other side, I would have never started dabbling, right? And so the first thing you have to do is become aware, is become, again, like, get the exposure, because if you don't, then how the fuck do you expect to change? And since you're watching this kind of video, I'm assuming you are already starting to get exposed, or maybe you have already gotten exposed, right? So that was the first step, was becoming aware of the other side. And so that's what happened to me. I slowly started watching videos on my feed about, again, drop shipping, trading, personal development, all these things. You know, I started a drop shipping store, was like the first thing I did, and then ultimately fell in love with trading, for example. And again, that would have never happened if I never knew about it. So the first thing is you have to get to know it. Now, what happened after that? I had to immerse myself into the environment. So first exposure, then emerging yourself, surrounding yourself in that environment. After I got exposed, the only thing I surrounded myself with was that environment, because I understood very quickly where it could take me and all these different things. Like, I remember one of the first videos I saw was my mentor at the time, he had a $40,000 day trading. And I was like, what the fuck? $40,000 like in a day? Are you crazy? Like, that's insane. And he was like living in I think it was Logan Paul's old apartment in Hollywood and all these things, and I was just mind blown, right? And so what I did is I immersed myself in that environment right away. I joined a trading community of, again, just in that environment, and then strictly anything and everything I did had to do with being in that environment. Because, guys, your environment, I don't really think I have to explain this to you, but your environment is everything, right? Maybe you've seen certain things on Instagram where they say, like, if you put a certain animal in a certain tank, it's never going to outgrow its tank, right? Like to the size of the actual animal itself. Or like if you, there's this other thing where there's some flies that jump really high. If you put them in a jar and they can only jump a certain height because there's a, obviously like a lid on the jar, once you take that jar off and put them in just some free space, they're never going to jump higher than the lid on the jar was beforehand because of their environment. They've been basically like molded by that in their mind. Anyway, it's a different conversation. But understanding how important your environment is, right? Because, I mean, to add on to that, like, bro, the most, at its simplest fucking thing, you hang out with a bunch of monkeys, you're going to become a monkey. Look at Tarzan, right? You hang out with a bunch of millionaires, you're going to become a fucking millionaire. And so I always understood the concept of environment. And so the second thing I did is I just completely immersed myself, completely. Anything that I did, bro, after immersing myself always had to do with making money, improving, and that's it. That's when I started cutting off all the bad habits, all the friends, everything. And that leads me to the third step. So once you immerse yourself in that environment, you must delete yourself from the other stuff in your current life, right? So you're basically supplementing. You're going into this, so you must extract yourself from this, okay? Because some of you, what you can do is you can immerse yourself, but you'll still catch yourself being on this side with all the bad habits and the bad friends, and so you're not actually immersed as much as you think you are, or this stuff is holding you back because you're going back and forth, when what you need to do is just be fully invested into this side. And you do that by cutting off the distractions, cutting off the friends, cutting off the bad habits. And so that's what I did. So the third thing is I started a 90-day blitz. I started going to the gym every single day. I stopped hanging out with all of my friends, started journaling every single day, eating clean, all these things. Now, why did I do that? For two main reasons, okay? The first main reason was there was this saying back then that I heard in a book, or maybe it was on YouTube, I don't remember. But what he said is mastering discipline in one aspect of your life will transfer over into the others. And in trading, if you guys are familiar, discipline is by far one of the most important things because you have to follow a trading plan regardless of your emotions and all these different things. And so I was like, okay, so if I start going to the gym and disciplining my life, then what that'll do for me is transfer over into my trading. And so what I tried to do is discipline my life as a whole. So that was the first thing. And the second reason I did this, obviously, was to eliminate the distractions, because when all you're doing and like when all of your time is consumed by gym, working out, same thing, working out, eating clean, trading, journaling, the whole 9 yards, right? You don't have time for this other stuff. And so I did this to supplement all the other stuff, because a big part of life you guys need to understand is it's very hard to just stop doing something. For example, like if you spend 2 hours a day doing a bad habit, you can't just stop and do nothing now for 2 hours. Like you have to supplement it. Like that's the easiest way to take out a bad habit and put in a good habit, is like supplement it. Don't just try to get rid of something and now you're doing nothing for 2 hours. No, it's like, okay, if you were smoking for 2 hours, for example, like now go to the gym for those 2 hours of you smoking, supplement the time. And so that's what I did. Like those were the two biggest reasons. And then obviously, like getting in shape and shit and transforming your mind and body. But that's the next step in the process. So I had to become self-aware of my mind and my body, because I've developed so much in these 5 years, and this has nothing to do with like monetary gain. This has nothing to do with materialistic stuff. This has nothing to do with women and all these external factors. Everything that changed for me in conquering myself was internal, right? As that kind of states, conquering yourself. And again, the only way you will conquer yourself is realizing that you have to conquer yourself. I always say this. First step in solving a problem is realizing there is one. And that's why it goes back to the first point of this, is you have to get exposed to the other side so that you realize that the side you're on right now, there's a problem with it, right? So Anyways, after I started this 90-day blitz, basically what you're doing is now you have to take action. You've immersed yourself into the environment, and it's all you do. You've supplemented the bad habits. Now you have to continuously take action. So that's what I did with the 90-day blitz. Now, what happens when you take action? What happens when you start journaling, for me, is I became more self-aware. In this 90-day blitz, again, like, bro, when you're in solitude, like, this is another big thing, okay? When you're in solitude, you have nothing else to do except to spend time with yourself and your work. Like, it's almost like by default, bro, do you become more self-aware, and then I'll add journaling and all this shit on top of it. And so after the 90-day blitz and during this shit, you need to, and you will by default, because you're going to be spending time by yourself, become more self-aware. And so again, how did I do that? I went to the gym by myself. I journaled, right? And in that 90-day period, again, this is like, if you're familiar with a 90-day blitz, it's like no distractions at all. Like, I fully immersed myself. Nothing else could come in between. And so fully immersing myself kept me alone. No girls, no parties, nothing. No hanging out, just me working the gym. And in that solitude did I become more self-aware of my thoughts and my actions. I really started to question everything. And so that's the next thing. It's like, in becoming self-aware, do you now question everything in your whole life? Like, everything. I'm talking from A to Z, bro. Like, I really started to question my actions. Why is it that I say certain things? Why is it that I think in certain ways? Where did I gain this concept of thinking from? Why do I think the way I think? Why do I do this? Am I looking for attention? Like, all of these things, you have to ask yourself why. Like, you have to become so self-aware, right? And then in that as well, you realize that nobody is, and this kind of goes back to the beginning, because with this change, like, you obviously have to come to some realizations of, like, nobody's there for me. Like, nobody's coming to save me. My family is not rich. Like, there's no other way out for me, right? Like, my family, like, I don't have a trust fund for me to live off of or some bullshit like that. Like, I have to make something work. And all of these realizations to then make the change, right? And so again, in all of that, you had to become more self-aware. And that's what I did for 90 days. And as funny as this sounds, like, it's going to take way longer than 90 days for you in conquering yourself, right? That was kind of just the momentum building, and the fucking, like, huge amounts of progress was seen in these 90 days of doing all of this solitude, all blah, 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 right? And then I continued doing that, and I still continue to do that to this day. Pretty much like almost everything I did during that 90-day blitz, I still do to this day. I go to the gym every day, all this stuff, right? And again, what did this do? This led to more solitude, bro. After these 90 days, again, I realized how much I had progressed. I realized how much more self-aware I had become. I realized how much further behind I actually am than I thought, and all of these things. And so I just continued to hammer at these actions every single day. And I did this for 2 to 3 years, like, really, really hard. I say this in all of my videos, like, I didn't talk to a single girl for 2 to 3 years. Like, I didn't hang out with anyone for 2 to 3 years. It was just kind of me, bro. And I think that's the answer you're looking for in this video, is like, how do you conquer yourself? I really think it comes from just being by yourself. But you can't just sit there and do nothing. Like, you have to sit there and analyze. You have to sit there and become self-aware. Like, think about what's going on in here, right? I always say, where's the most peaceful place in the world? It's in your mind. You've just never looked there. You might think it's the Bahamas. You might think it's, somewhere in Palm Beach or wherever the fuck. The most peaceful place in the world is in your mind. Some of you think that that's the most non-peaceful place in the world. You think you have the most hectic place in the world is your mind. And that's the problem you're dealing with. You need to figure out what's going on in there. And there's no real clear answer for me to give you except you need to sit there and question everything and why things are going on in there. And so that's what I did. I basically just spent an intense amount of time by myself. And to an extent, do I think it was maybe too long? Yes. Sometimes I think I spent a little too much time by myself. But I don't think I would have developed as much as I did, to be honest. And in those 3 years, bro, did I just come to realize so many things. And then in 2 to 3 years of hitting the gym every day, did I become a fucking beast, right? And in that, did I become more confident? In that time, did I realize the way I move and that I'm not living for anybody and that I don't need to impress anybody and nobody is paying my bills, and so do I really give a fuck what anybody thinks, and all of these things, which allowed me to develop. And again, like, those were the steps that got me to being by myself, but that's the answer. There's no real key, but that's what it was for me. It was just, I had to spend time by myself. And to this day, when I don't know the answer to something, how do I figure it out? I sit there by myself and figure it out. And so I think a lot of the questions you're looking for the answers to are in being by yourself and figuring out, okay? Giving yourself some time to think. Now, at the same time, I don't like that statement because I always hate when people say, I need to think about it. Or me, for example, like, I never really say, oh yeah, hold up, I need to think about it. No. Like, when you say that, usually you're just bullshitting. But there are certain things, and I mean more so internal things, that you do need to sit there and think about. But it needs to be fast thinking, bro. You don't want to sit there and think about things for months and years, because that's how you get fucked. That's literally how you get stuck and waste so much time, and I've been there. I've sat there and thought about my life for months, and what was I doing at this time in my life? I was fucking working at Target for 3 months. $14 an hour because I couldn't figure out what was going on in my mind because I was consistently just thinking about it. Right? And that's what I'm saying. You can't get stuck in thinking about it. It needs to be quick thinking. But more so in the sense of, like, again, in that solitude of being alone for 3 years, did I figure everything out and understand, like, sense of direction and all these things. And all I'm getting at, bro, is you need to learn to be by yourself. In being by yourself, I think you will learn how to conquer your own self. But don't sit there and just think about things for too long ever. Because you don't get anywhere by thinking, you get somewhere by doing. Right? And this leads me to the last point of the video, is like, in these 3 years, did I just sit there and think to myself? To an extent, yes, but not really. I was always doing things. Like, I always had actions. Like, the answers I was looking for never came from just like sitting there. No. The answer to my questions came by doing and figuring shit out in doing. Right? Like, the best example I can give to you on how action pretty much solved everything for me, and why I think I became so in shape, right? Like, guys, the only reason I feel like I'm in this shape, like, I'm fucking jacked. I don't care what you guys say. Like, I look good, bro, and I'm built. And the only reason I think this is because when I didn't have anything else to do, all I did was go to the gym. Sometimes it got to the point where I went like twice a day at one point, because I realized, like, okay, like, I don't know what else to do. To an extent, there were periods in my journey where, like, I wasn't making any money. I didn't know how still. Like, I'm trying to figure this all out. What can I do? All right, I can go to the gym. That's what I can do. Get more in shape. Go beat myself up some more, right? Like, that's, I feel like, the only reason I got in this shape, is because when I was bored, or when I didn't know what to do, I always figured out something to do, and that was going to the gym or some shit, right? Because action always solves everything, not just like sitting there and thinking about it. Don't sit there and think about anything. It's not going to do any good for you. You always figure things out in doing. And again, to clear that up a little, like in these 3 years, I spent time by myself, but it wasn't just me sitting there for 3 years and thinking about things in my head. No, it was being by myself and doing all these things by myself. And in that did I figure out, okay, yeah, right? And in journaling and in action and writing, like believe me, you don't just get places by sitting there. Let me hit this. Oh, why is that? You don't just get places by sitting there and thinking about it. Believe me, it doesn't get you anywhere. So boys, hopefully that made some sense. Hopefully that gave you guys a little bit of like a little bit of a framework to follow. It's like first you need to get exposed, then you need to immerse yourself, then you need to fucking disassociate yourself with the other side, and then all these other things, and then spend time alone by yourself, right? But it's a big thing that I have come to learn nowadays as well is like, because I always wanted to just do things by myself, right? Because I spent so much time by myself, like I like being by myself. But then now I've come to realize in hearing other, big guys on the internet talk, it's like you actually don't really want to be by yourself too much to an extent, because again, the world is ran in packs. The world is ran in like gangs and brotherhoods, right? And so I always said this, like if I go out with my brother and my business partner and his little brother, you're with the gang. Nobody can fuck with you, right? And to an extent, it's the same when you're by yourself. But now if you're by yourself and you come across 4 other dudes and you're not doing anything and they just want to fuck you up for fun, you're getting fucked up, right? And it's a 4v1. And that's to an extent, like that was maybe a little bit of an extreme example, but that's how the world is ran. If you're running something and there's 4 other dudes and they got 4 brains and you only have 1, like most of the time you're gonna get fucked because there's 4 of them and 1 of you. And we don't need to get into details like if you're smarter than all 4 of them, but no, like just at base level, like if there's 4 of them and 1 of you, bro, like there's so much more advantage to being 4 dudes together and like than just 1. I think you understand what I'm getting at. And that's the same thing that I've come to realize in hearing all this. It's like the lone wolf really does die nowadays. You need to learn to hunt together, hunt in a pack, because you're at more of an advantage. You have more, like there's more strategy involved in all these things. And so that's the only thing I'll add on top of that. It's like I've come to realize that spend time by yourself. There's definitely a period I think every man has to go through by himself. But understand, bro, this self-made bullshit and trying to conquer the world by yourself, I don't think it's really the best way to approach life. If you think of any great conqueror, he never really did it by himself. He always had a fucking army, right? Now, yes, obviously he was the leader and stuff, but he could never have done it completely by himself. Like if you put Alexander the Great or any great conqueror in history against an army of 1,000 guys, like he's dying no matter how strong this man is. So 1,000 people are always gonna out fucking perform one. And so it's like, no, yes, he's the leader, but he had fucking army, right? And so you need to have a brotherhood, you need to have a gang. And I don't mean that kind of gang, but you need to have the mafia, you know what I mean? Otherwise, it's going to be very hard for you to succeed in this world, because that's just how things are ran. When you understand at the top level, now that I've slowly risen the standard and just slowly developed over the years and have been exposed to things, you realize that. Like the dudes at the top are moving in packs, bro. They usually always have people around them. Like they're never like really just by themselves. Think of most influencers you know, right? You always see like they have 4 or 5 dudes around them consistently. And these 4 or 5 dudes are also top tier dudes around them, right? Whether if it's like their security guards, whether if it's, people working for them, but at very high positions. And then if it's other, top dogs just consistently being around them, like The world is always moving in gangs, bro. The top dogs are always moving in gangs. And so you need to be the same way. But again, what I'm getting at with this is like, that's how you'll conquer yourself. Be by yourself for a little. Question everything. Again, another thing I did was being exposed to the environment and fully emerging myself is I always sought out information. I never stopped learning. And to this day, I do the same, right? Like, there were books I read. If you go on my Instagram, you can see I have a highlighted story where I read like 5 books in the span of, I don't actually remember in the span of how long, but just back to back to back. Early on in my journey while I was doing the 90-day blitz, or it was a little after. And so I was always just learning in the solitude, always improving, always fucking trying to move forward. Again, this goes back to the point, like, I never just sat there and did nothing by myself. Like, you have to do things and seek knowledge continuously by yourself. So, boys, hopefully that made some sense in conquering yourself and how I was able to do it. It was just being by myself. And I'll, maybe in the future I'll make another video on like breaking it really down to the point of, what it means exactly and all these things. But for now, I think that'll give you a better understanding. With that being said, gents, hopefully you took some value from this video. Guys, if you want to work with me one-on-one on how to build your online business through personal branding, through high-ticket coaching, you can apply to work with me. It's the first link in the description. Hit 10,000 fucking subscribers on YouTube. Don't get left behind. As always, we're going to continue to grow. You need to be part of the growth. Also, there is a free training for you to check out if you're hesitant. And then go fucking subscribe to the Instagram. Gives you guys a little insight to my life. I'm a lot more active on there, posting on the stories every day. So, love you, boys. Again, hopefully you took some value, and I'll see you guys in the next video.